My dear friends, the dawn of October 13 rises not as any other day, but as a whisper from eternity, a quiet stirring in the soul that says, watch closely. Something sacred approaches. The calendar may call it ordinary, the world may scroll past it with indifferent fingers, but heaven hides surprises in the folds of time, and today, this very date, is a gentle unveiling of what was written long before you ever began to count your days. There are days that merely pass, and there are days that speak. Today speaks. It does not shout through thunder or blaze with lightning, but it moves through stillness like a letter slipped under your door by unseen hands. A letter written in the language of grace. You may not yet understand why this day holds its weight, but something deep within you already knows. It is the feeling that something good has been waiting for you patiently, and now it begins to step out of the shadows. Life, after all, is never as random as it appears. The path you have walked, the tears you wiped quietly, the hopes that refused to die, the prayers you whispered when no one saw, none of it was wasted. October 13 is not arriving unannounced. It has been circling closer like a long, promised answer. The seeds you buried in seasons of faithlessness, the efforts that seemed unseen, the kindnesses that bloomed in secret, all have been ripening beyond your sight. There are days when heaven simply says, now. And October 13 is such a day. The surprise it carries is not the noise of luck, but the orchestration of divine timing. What you thought was delay was preparation. What felt like silence was tuning. This is not coincidence. It is appointment. When surprises come, they often wear the disguise of smallness. The miracle rarely arrives with trumpets. It enters quietly, like a visitor who knocks gently so as not to disturb your doubt. That is why so many miss the wonder of their own answered prayers. But for those with eyes that have been trained by longing, for those whose hearts still listen for a whisper amidst the wind, today will not go unnoticed. There are gifts that are not wrapped in paper, but in moments, blessings that do not descend from clouds but rise from the quiet realization that this is it. You may wake up today to the same walls, the same duties, the same name, but something unseen has shifted. The air carries promise, the hour carries meaning, and your soul, if you listen closely, will feel the gentle tremor of divine attention. For months, perhaps for years, you have been walking through what felt like endless corridors. You wondered if any door would ever open, if any light would ever pierce the familiar dark. Yet it is the nature of divine surprises that they come precisely when you have stopped demanding them, when your hands have released control and your heart stands quietly before the mystery of trust. October 13 is not about luck falling upon you. It is about alignment, about the moment when all that was once scattered begins to gather itself into purpose. You will find that the lessons of your waiting were not punishment but formation. The silence was teaching you to hear. The stillness was teaching you to see. The delay was teaching you to value the gift before it comes. Do not look for this surprise in the loud or the lavish. Look for it in the conversation that shifts something inside you, in the encounter that feels fated, in the message that arrives at just the right hour, in the unexpected peace that settles where fear once lived. Perhaps the surprise will not change your circumstances overnight, but it will begin to change you, the truest and deepest miracle of all. There is something holy about this day that asks you to be awake, to not rush past it with your usual hurry. The greatest moments of destiny rarely arrive with spectacle. They arrive in simplicity. And those who have trained their hearts in gratitude are the first to notice the glimmer beneath the ordinary. You have waited long enough to see what your endurance was guarding. The gates of your tomorrow are about to open slightly, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you that promises are never forgotten. Every tear you cried became a part of the blueprint. Every disappointment that bent you low was bending you toward something higher. October 13 is the answer's soft entrance, not shouted from the sky, but spoken into your heart like a secret. You are not forgotten, and this day comes to prove it. There is a rhythm in the universe that always returns to balance, a justice that makes beauty out of ashes, a poetry that rewrites loss into legacy. And you, dear listener, stand today in the middle of that sacred unfolding. Let your heart be still and your eyes gentle toward this day. Let go of the cynicism that tells you it's just another date. Do not rush to measure its meaning. Meaning often reveals itself backward. But know this, something you have carried as burden will begin to feel lighter. Something you feared had ended will find a new breath, and something you once prayed for will look at you quietly and say, I never left. There are divine appointments we only recognize after they've passed. But there are rare moments, like this one, where you can feel the nearness of destiny while it's happening. October 13 holds that nearness. It is not just a date, it is an invitation. It invites you to believe again, not in the shallow optimism of chance, but in the deep assurance that your story is being written with intention. It calls you to lift your gaze from the noise of the world and notice the melody playing beneath it. There is music in this day if you have ears to hear it. A quiet symphony that tells of beginnings disguised as endings, of blessings wearing the face of delay. And somewhere in that melody, your name is being spoken, not as an afterthought, but as a cherished refrain. You may have thought the stage of your life was empty, but October 13 is when the curtain slowly rises again. This is the day the universe leans closer, not to startle, but to surprise you with tenderness. You have not been overlooked. You have been prepared. You are standing at the edge of something you prayed for long ago and nearly forgot. Today whispers, it's time. And though you may not yet see the full picture, something within you already rejoices, because your spirit recognizes home when it hears it calling. The surprise is not only what will happen, it is the rediscovery of who you are in the light, of what's been waiting for you all along. Every promise has its hour, and every soul its season. Nothing in the fabric of time is stitched by accident, nothing that is meant for you will pass you by. The hands of eternity move with precision, not haste. There are days we wish to arrive early, and moments we wish to last forever. But everything comes exactly when it should, not a heartbeat sooner or later. October 13 stands as a quiet witness to that truth. It is a date chosen not by coincidence but by orchestration. The unfolding of a promise that has been maturing beyond the reach of your impatience. If only you could see the vast machinery of grace moving behind what you call delay, you would understand that heaven is never late. It is meticulous. We, in our fragile humanity, measure time in hours and years, but eternity measures it in readiness. You may have been waiting for something, a sign, a turn, a release, and wondered why the silence seemed so long. Yet every unanswered prayer was being rewritten, refined, softened until it could fit the shape of who you were becoming. Divine timing is not about events aligning. It is about you aligning with what you once asked for. The promise cannot arrive until the vessel is ready to hold it. And that readiness, my friend, takes time. It is a sculpting, an unseen chiseling of the soul until what was once restless becomes steady enough to receive. Think of the seed buried in soil. For months it dwells in darkness, unseen by the eye. If one were to dig it up too soon in curiosity or doubt, it would appear lifeless. But all the while, something miraculous is happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming, unseen foundations are being laid. Then, one day, the earth trembles slightly, and a fragile green shoot breaks through. The gardener smiles, not because it appeared suddenly, but because it appeared when it was meant to. So too with your life. You have not been forgotten in the ground. You have been growing in secret. October 13 is that quiet trembling of the earth, the whisper before the bloom. Every soul must learn the sacred rhythm of waiting, not as punishment, but as preparation. Impatience is the language of fear, patience is the dialect of trust. Those who wait without bitterness learn to see with eyes of faith, and those eyes begin to notice how even the delays were kind. For had things come too early, they might have crushed you. Blessings unripe can feel like burdens. Opportunities premature can wound. But divine timing weaves protection into every postponement. What you thought was rejection was often redirection. What felt like silence was strategy. The universe, in its quiet wisdom, has been rearranging pieces so that when your moment arrives, it will not collapse under its own weight. October 13, therefore, is not just another day on the calendar. It is a window. Through it, you glimpse the mysterious artistry of timing. Some promises are kept in vaults of time because the heart that must carry them still needs fortification. You cannot run with a blessing you haven't trained for. You cannot sustain joy with muscles still built for despair. So heaven waits, not idly, but lovingly, until the weight of your peace matches the weight of your promise. And then, one morning, the waiting ends not with a shout, but with a whisper now. If you listen closely, you might hear that whisper today. It does not come from outside of you, but from within, from the part of your spirit that recognizes divine rhythm. It feels like calm suddenly settling after years of restlessness, like a door opening inside your chest. That is how you know your season has changed, not by thunder or applause, but by peace. For when divine timing finally aligns, there is no striving left. The river simply carries you where it was always meant to. Many people miss their moment because they mistake stillness for stagnation. They grow weary in waiting and begin to chase what was already on its way. But those who understand the slow beauty of divine order learn to rest in the waiting. They water their faith even when the soil looks barren, and in doing so, they align themselves with the tempo of eternity. October 13 is the fruit of such alignment. It is the day the unseen becomes seen, when patience is no longer a virtue to hold but a story to tell. Look back on the days that felt endless, the prayers that seemed unanswered. Can you see now how each of them shaped you? The disappointments that taught humility, the pauses that built endurance, the detours that redirected you towards something truer. They were all brushstrokes on the same canvas. Nothing was wasted. The promise has been following you quietly, adjusting its pace to match your steps. And now, on this day, you and your promise finally walk in rhythm. What divine timing gives is not merely the thing you wanted. It gives perspective. It allows you to look upon your own journey with gentleness. You realize that what you called delay was grace wearing a slower face. You see how what seemed like endings were actually thresholds. And in that seeing, gratitude blooms. The bitterness dissolves, replaced by awe. For when you understand that even the waiting was part of the gift, you begin to live differently. You stop demanding, and you start trusting. October 13 calls you to such trust. It invites you to release your grip on how things should happen and marvel at how they actually do. For promises do not break. They simply bloom in their own season. And when they finally do, the joy feels deeper because of the journey that shaped it. There is sweetness in fulfillment that only the waiting heart can taste. There is light in revelation that only the once blind can truly see. So today, if your heart feels that quiet stirring, do not dismiss it. It is the rhythm of promise keeping time. It is eternity tapping gently on the door of your ordinary day. Every second of your waiting was counted, every sigh recorded, every tear turned into rain for your coming harvest. Nothing has been forgotten. Not the dream, not the prayer, not you. Divine timing has remembered, and now it begins to unfold its surprise. October 13, therefore, stands as both a reminder and a revelation. A reminder that time bends under the will of grace, and a revelation that the hour you thought would never come has quietly arrived. Every promise has its hour, and this may well be yours. Not because you forced it, but because you were faithful enough to wait for it. The patience you once resented has become your crown, and the very delay you feared has turned into a doorway. The season has shifted. The air itself feels different because you are different. You have learned to trust the clock of heaven, and that trust has become the key to your fulfillment. October 13 is the day that proves promises kept by divine timing are worth every moment of waiting. For when heaven finally says, now, even the years of silence make sense, and every fragment of your past finds its purpose in the beauty of this unfolding hour. When the surprise unfolds, it will not just change your path. It will restore your faith in the author who never stopped writing your story. Because every human soul, at some point, begins to wonder if the pen of providence has run dry, if the ink of mercy has faded upon their name. You may have felt it too. That H of silence, that long stretch of unanswered prayers where heaven seems to turn its face. But the truth that October 13 comes to whisper is that the story was never abandoned. The author has simply been writing in invisible ink, waiting for the right light to reveal what has always been there. And that light, my friend, begins to dawn today. Faith, in its purest form, is trust without evidence. It is the quiet conviction that though the page looks blank, something sacred is still being written. There are chapters of your life you thought ended in failure, lines that seem to trail into emptiness. But divine authorship does not waste ink. Every pause, every detour, every heart-hatch has meaning beyond its pain. You are living a narrative larger than your comprehension, and the surprise of this day is not merely in what will happen to you, but in what you will see anew. You will begin to notice that what once looked like chaos now forms the rhythm of perfect design. Sometimes, restoration does not come through miracles that defy nature. It comes through realization that reveals nature's author. The surprise is not always that your circumstances change, but that your sight does. Where there was once confusion, there is now clarity. Where you once doubted, you begin to see traces of a wisdom so tender and vast that it humbles you. You realize that even the storm that frightened you was steering your ship toward home. You realize that you were never lost, only led by a route you would not have chosen, but needed to take. That is divine authorship. It writes through what you call mistake and turns it into meaning. October 13 arrives to reawaken this awareness. It is not simply the unveiling of a gift, it is the renewal of a relationship, the one between your heart and its maker. Somewhere along your journey, perhaps disappointment dulled that connection. You prayed, and the sky remained still. You believed, and yet the doors stayed shut. Slowly, disbelief began to creep in, whispering that maybe you were forgotten, maybe your life was an unfinished story left on a shelf. But this day comes as a quiet rebuke to that despair. It says, the author never stopped writing. You simply turned the page too early. When the divine surprise comes, it will not rush in with spectacle, but unfold with gentleness. You will recognize it not by its grandeur, but by its familiarity. Because it will feel like coming home to something you always knew. Perhaps it will be an unexpected opportunity, a reconciliation, a healing, or a peace that finally settles after long unrest. But whatever form it takes, it will carry a sacred fingerprint, one that reminds you of a love that never forgot you. And in that moment, faith will rise again. Not as a borrowed phrase, but as a living fire. Faith restored is not faith that demands proof. It is faith that finds peace even when the proof remains unseen. You will begin to understand that miracles were never about spectacle. They were always about recognition. The real miracle is not that water turns to wine, but that hearts recognize who stands among them. The surprise of this day will reintroduce you to that awareness. It will bring you face to face with the quiet constancy of grace. You will feel, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that the author has not only remembered you, but delights in your chapter. Every great story has moments where the characters lose sight of the plot. They wander, question, and doubt the narrator's intent. Yet, when the resolution arrives, they see that every shadow served a purpose. So too it is with you. The tears that watered your nights were the ink of your becoming. The trials that threatened to break, you were carving out the depth required for your joy. The loneliness you feared was the silence in which your next chapter was being written. October 13 is the threshold where the story begins to make sense again. Not because everything becomes easy, but because everything becomes meaningful. And when that meaning dawns upon your heart, something profound happens. You begin to trust again, not merely in what you see, but in who writes what you cannot. You stop chasing after control and start resting in authorship. You no longer fear the blank page because you know whose hand holds the pen. That is restoration in its truest form. It is not the return of lost things, but the renewal of lost trust. It is the shift from asking, Why me? To whispering, thank you. October 13 stands as a reminder that faith is not born in certainty, but in surrender. It is not the confident stride of one who knows the way, but the humble step of one who knows the guide. When the surprise unfolds, it will not only reveal new blessings, it will reawaken old belief. You will look back at the twists and turns, the prayers unanswered and dreams delayed, and see them now as part of a grand, merciful design. You will feel the tenderness of a God who was never distant, only deliberate. And from that awareness, something eternal will begin to bloom inside you. Gratitude will replace grievance. Wonder will silence worry. You will no longer measure divine goodness by how smooth your path feels, but by how present grace has been in every rough place. You will find joy not in what you possess, but in who has been with you all along. The surprise, you see, is not only that your story continues, but that it was never broken. It was being beautifully rewritten all along. So when the moment comes, and it will, do not rush to explain it away. Do not call it luck or coincidence. Let awe have its hour. Let your heart kneel before the quiet majesty of timing that waited until now. For you will know in that instant that this is not merely an event. It is a conversation between heaven and your soul. The author is reminding you, gently but unmistakably, that your story is still sacred, your journey still guided, your ending still glorious. And when you breathe in that truth, something eternal will settle over you, a peace that no circumstance can steal, a faith that no doubt can drown, a certainty that no darkness can unwrite. The path ahead will shine differently, not because it is free of trial, but because you will walk it with trust reborn. The surprise of October 13, therefore, is not merely that life gives again, but that love has never stopped giving. It restores your faith not in outcomes, but in the author himself, the one who, from the first breath to the final chapter, has been writing beauty into your becoming, and who today turns the page once more.